I am Pastor Frank Ray, pastor of this wonderful New Salem Missionary Baptist Church. Welcome to the 93rd church anniversary celebration. Many of you have experienced where we are now, but have no idea where we came from. This place is our humble beginning. It is where we started 93 years ago here on Franklin Street. Some wonderful people that loved the Lord, people that were born again, saved, and the Lord placed a special blessing upon their lives. He anointed them, allowed them to be the leaders, to be the pioneers, to get us where we should and ought to be. I am so grateful. I am eternally grateful to God for them, for what they are, what they've done, and how they led us and brought us to this place. Of course, we're building on the shoulders of the people that started this church 93 years ago in this building that you see right before you. In 1928, first Sunday in April, this New Salem church was organized with a handful of members, pioneers that loved the Lord and gave their lives to the cause of Christ and the kingdom. Perhaps they could not see a New Salem as it is now, 93 years ago, but thank God for the humble beginning. These are the people that started, built this building, and allowed it to be the beginning of a wonderful and a great ministry. I don't know the people that were there prior to me. There were 5 pastors that served before they moved to Tillman Street. 5 pastors, each pastor served about 2 to 3 years apiece, and they moved on. And of course, we thank God for the first pastors and the first group of saints of New Salem. And isn't it amazing how after 93 years, this building is still standing? 93 years, this building, where people came to sing, "I love the Lord, He heard my cry." This building where revival was taking place, this building where saints accepted Christ as their Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. This building is where the Word of God was preached, right here in this building, and God has blessed this place. 93 years later, it is still here, still standing. Oh my God, can you imagine how this neighborhood was 93 years ago, and the neighborhood is still here right now? I applaud the neighborhood, the people in the neighborhood, the ones that made it possible, made it what it is right this day. I wanted the saints of Salem to see where we came from, because the Bible says that there grew up a nation that knew not Joseph. If you didn't remember the Joseph in the Old Testament, you cannot appreciate him in the New. So let me again say to you, thank you. God bless you. My goodness, I'm excited for 93 years of celebration of the New Salem Missionary Baptist Church.
We started on Franklin Street at 645 Franklin at Brother Waddell's house. And Reverend Bridgewater was the first pastor, and they only had a small number of members there, but they started the church. They stayed there for maybe about a year, meeting in his home, and then the next year, in 1929, and remember this is when the Great Depression was starting, that we were going through all of that, but yet still they were willing to keep a church going. And by that time, they had saved up enough money to build this small white frame building back on Glanker Street. On Tillman Street at 682 Tillman. They bought this land from the Roberts Company. And as a result, they were able to move into that church. Sister Rubadine Davis, she was just a little girl at that time. And Sister Rebecca Rubin were very, very small at that time. But But by moving in there, we stayed there for a period of time, and then we had other ministers to come in, Reverend Hooker, around in the early 1930s, and then around 1938, my mother and all of them were converted. Miss Sammy Johnson, who our fellowship hall was named for, she was converted. Sister Marie Banks, she was the daughter of Miss Martha Price, who was a very influential person in our church. And all of them became members, and they were all singing in the choir. And from there on, during the 1930s, they were struggling, but yet and still, they made New Salem a church that you really wanted to attend. And then that led us on up to the 1940s, and Reverend Harrison Banks, eventually Marie Banks, married her, but he kind of became very, very ill. And because of that, we had to end up getting a new pastor, and that's when we got Reverend L.A. Blake around 1947, thereabout, to come into the ministry. And it was just kind of history from there up until Reverend Ray.
The name Salem is found in Genesis chapter 14, verses 18, where Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought bread and wine, and it was there the first time tithing was mentioned in the Bible. Salem, however, is a name that came out of the name Jerusalem. Jerusalem is, of course, the holy city, and Salem, you cannot spell Jerusalem without spelling Salem. I was called to this church, of course, 1972, the first Sunday in February. What an outstanding opportunity I had. I didn't know this church. I knew nothing at all about it. But the very same time that the church stood and retired the former pastor, second Sunday in September 1971, it's the same time, of course, that I accepted my call into the ministry 30 miles away. God brought us, delivered us, He kept us. We started in this particular building. Of course, again, this is our second location here for the Salem Baptist Church. We stayed here. I stayed here 6 years after I became pastor before we moved to the other location. Sister Bernice Baker, outstanding sister, member of our church, was the person that invited me to come and to preach the gospel here at Salem. We had about 35 active members when I became pastor of Salem, and when we left 6 years later and moved, we had over 600 members. The church grew, it blossomed, and I am so excited about this wonderful place here. The building that I was in when I came to this church is torn down. We sold the building to another church. They locate this place now.
Well, as I remember, because I had gone off to college and spent some time at Tennessee State University, and came back home in 1960. I graduated in 64 from college, and then in 66 I got married, and so I was kind of had my own life to a certain extent, so I really wasn't involved directly with the church per se. I was a member, but it was not until after I started teaching, maybe around the late 60s, that I began to get more involved in the church. And so even though my father was a deacon, and many people were saying, well, you ought to be a deacon, but I just never could really get myself really involved. But from what I remember, we had several ministers to come over because if I remember correctly, Reverend Henson was the one who, after Reverend Blake became very, very feeble, and they decided it might be time for him to relinquish his position, they declared the pulpit vacant, and as a result, they had several ministers to come in. And if I remember, I think Reverend Brooks, I believe it was Bobby Brooks, one of the names of minister who has a church even today. he was one of the ones they brought over, and some others for us to listen to. And so after Reverend Ray came over and spoke, if I remember correctly, Miss Hobbs, she was one of our deacon's wives, and a very outspoken lady.
Really?
She said,
That's us, Pastor.
that is our pastor. That's us, pastor, right there. And so we would always vote on, whether everything was pretty democratic as a whole, but as a whole, they decided that Reverend Ray would be our pastor, and from then on, from 1972, he's been with us 49 years.
We're now at 2231 South Parkway East here in the city of Memphis, Tennessee, and I should say to us that it was not easy to move to this location. A church that had been in the Binghamton area for now 40-some years. Many of the saints of Salem were residents in the area of Binghamton. It was not easy for them to make a decision to move from Tilma to Parkway. We had a vote, first of all, after the church voted that we would move. It was Patricia DeBerry that made the recommendation, because we was trying to remain in the Binghamton area. She said, Reverend, there are many of us that don't live in this area. Why do we have to maintain a church in the Binghamton area when we can move somewhere else? It was then that I sought out to find property in other areas. This was a location, 2231, that was held by the late Pastor Oris Mays. He was going to build a church here himself. He released the property, and so we purchased this property for $39,000 to build this new location. Once we had purchased the property, our final meeting with the deacon ministry of our church, there were 18 deacons. 16 voted it down, said we can't do it. We don't want to take a chance on trying to move. There were only 2 deacons that said, Reverend, if you believe we can do it, we can do it. And so we set out. It was in February of 1972, 78, I'm sorry. It was in February 1978 when we made our final decision to move to this location. We broke ground in March of 1978, and we moved here. It took them 3 months to actually build this building. We moved here on the 3rd Sunday in August 1978. 16 members that was members of our congregation refused to move. They decided to stay in the old place. And we took the rest that would go. We motorcade from 682 Tilma Street to this location on Parkway. Cars from everywhere came. This building was built to hold 600 people, and they were literally standing around the wall. No one joined the first Sunday we came, but the second Sunday, 38 people joined this church, and it started growing by leaps and bounds from that day until we stayed in this location for 6 years and we had outgrown this place, I had made a recommendation that we would take what we call our fellowship hall and open a wall and extend the sanctuary. Sadie Wiley, one of the sweet members of our church, I had just finished preaching Don't Stoop at Standing Time. That's in the book of Acts chapter 3, verse 16 through 18. She wrote on a piece of paper after we decided to vote on trying to enlarge the building. She said, don't stoop at standing time. And I took what she said and went back to the church, said, let's build again. Yes, this area here was our fellowship hall. Right in here was our kitchen. This was the kitchen of the church. Here, all of this was open, with the exception of this full room here. That was our trustee room. Here, we had 2 classrooms here when we built the first building. Our intent was to cut this out and make this one room, cut this whole wall out, and that this would be part of the sanctuary. It was this that caused Sister Sadie Wiley to say, don't stoop at standing time. So don't just cut this out for this. Let's do something to the church, to add on to the church structure.
When we first moved here, I guess you could say we almost slipped in. People did not really realize what was really going on. And we wanted to cut a space in the, I guess, the median for us to come into the driveway so that we wouldn't have to go down to the end of the street and come back. But people were against it, would not allow us to do it. And because the people were fought against it, we could not do it. A big storm came and hit the main trees where the cut through was going to go. So they couldn't say anything then because the trees were not there anymore. So we were able to cut through the median to get into our driveway at at what we call the chapel now. And I would say the more I've lived, the more in awe I have become of God's power and His ability to function. It might not be what you think or what you would like to be, but ultimately, you'll come out ahead by following His dictates.
But that's the Sunday school lesson.
Yeah, it is.
Joshua,
yeah.
where he had already laid out the plan and everything for how to take Jericho.
That's right.
And told them they weren't going to have to do anything but just follow His man. He told them what's going to happen before it happened. Exactly. And so that's what God had for us.
We didn't know
when He placed us here on Parkway. And later on, the people on Parkway recognized on down through the years after we had been here for a while, they recognized that it wasn't our move, it was God's move.
And they began gravitating to us then. Whereas at first, we had a very difficult time with the people in the community.
Yeah, but we were from Binghamton was
not bourgeoisie.
Yes, but it was also known for other things than spiritual things.
That time we voted again on building, put an addition onto the church. And of course, every person voted to do it but one member. We had one member that voted it down and said she didn't think we should do it. However, we went on and built. That was in 1983, was when we added the L onto this building. But we had no fellowship hall. And I wanted the members to remember where we came from. The building on Tillman Street was a building that was 33 by 66. That's the size of the building, 33 feet wide, 66 feet long. And so I decided that we'd put the fellowship hall on it, and we built the fellowship hall the same size the church was on Tillman Street. It's 33 by 66, to remind the members every time they walk in now what we call the Sammy Johnson room. Every time they walk in that room, they see the size of Salem was when I became pastor of the New Salem Church.
Well, the mindset was a lot of the members, I don't want to move.
That's right.
I don't want to leave Binghamton. We want to stay out here. This is where we've been all our lives. This is all we know. And basically, that was the kind of mindset of the people in Binghamton as a whole anyway. We just really didn't venture too much outside of that domain of Binghamton. Matter of fact, I remember, I think Reverend Ray and some other people were saying they had looked over on Johnson in that area, and they were looking for a place over there, enough room, and then they had looked over there on Tillman where we were, and we had a few houses over there that were available, and we tried to buy some of the property, and even some of the property behind us, and some of the people were willing to sell, some were not willing to sell. A lot of the old members, even my grandmother, Miss Ruby Taylor, Miss Minnie Collins, Miss Jessie Holmes, all these people, they were relatives of mine. They say, well, I'm not going anywhere. I'm staying out here in Binghamton. As a matter of fact, they never did leave. They decided they would join Princeton Baptist Church down on Scott Street, and it took some doing to try to convince a lot of people to want to leave. But after we came over one day, Reverend Ray brought us over here and looked at this wilderness, basically, at the time, weeds growing all up everywhere, and all these old apartments, and you say, well, this is where we're going to be. I hope y'all are with me. And some people came, some didn't, but basically the mindset was, I would say maybe 50-50 of the people wanted to come, and about maybe 50% of them decided they would stay. And so basically, the ones who did come, they stayed, and they're still, a lot of them are still here even today. Many of them have passed on, but it was a great move, and it was a move that we really needed. Although we think about First Baptist down on Broad Street, they are still there. The pastor there has done wonders in with that church, but yet and still, I think it was time for us to get out of Binghamton.
We had two to vote on that night.
Yeah.
What was your friend's name?
Let me recall.
Anyway.
What can be my friend?
Because you put him up there. But anyway, it was supposed to be a vote. And a man was, who was a man outside? No, that was about Baker. But anyway, the vote was...
Oh, Baker was for Ray. Baker was for Ray.
Yeah.
He and R.F. Fleming.
Flemings and his sister. Yeah, they all was for Reverend Ray because they knew him from Arlington. And but I didn't know Reverend Ray, and I didn't want his friend, so I didn't vote for either one of them. So that was it for me.
What about you, Reverend Carol?
It came down to Libby McCall and Frank Ray. And I say that there were some people that voted that should not have voted, but they did vote, and Reverend Ray had the highest number.
Do you recall what the number was?
27-25.
Yeah, it was close.
27-25, I believe. 27-40.
It was 40. It was 40, 49, wasn't it 49, 50?
Oh, yeah, that meant for that church.
But anyway, it was like one vote apart.
Yeah, very close.
Yeah.
And there was some question as to the legality of the vote. And it was brought out the fact, the seal with Gamaliel in the Bible. If it is of God, it will be. If it is not of God, it will not be. And obviously, it was of God, because it's 49 years later, he's still here.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think the reception, to a certain extent, was somewhat tentative in a way where people were kind of feeling him out, trying to determine, is this truly, the man of God that we believe, that we're hoping that he is, even though he wore his hair very, very long, with jerry curl. He had very manicured nails. He, and all these kind of things, and a great big cross around, around his neck, and people was beginning to wonder, but he had a lot of flair about him.
Super fly.
And so, and that's, and people were just kind of just wondering, okay, who is this guy, But as time went on, his preaching was just so magnifying. I mean, it would just would draw you. I mean, and more people began to come and wanting to hear and wanting to listen, and they could see that he was a very humble person because, I guess, of his upbringing, and having grown up in the country and whatever, he could seem to relate very, very well with just everybody, and he always wore that big smile, that really just kind of captivated most people, and then because of that, people began to really accept him as their true minister and the one that they really wanted to put all their faith and trust in.
I think also, it was talking about tentative. It was tentative for a while because every year they voted on whether to keep him there or not. And I think after about the third year, it was a situation where the church was put in position, but either he is or he is not.
Yeah.
And the church decided to go with him. And of course, that's when I say things basically exploded as far as membership is concerned. He came in 71, 72.
Yeah.
All right. So by 75, by 76, people were leaving because they didn't have anywhere to park, didn't have anywhere to sit. And that's when we had to make the move to find a different location. And I would say the majority of the people wanted to stay. And when we could not find space in Binghamton, that's when we realized that we had to go someplace else. And that's when we came over here. And no joke, it was the biggest joke. When we came over here and looked at this lot, and it was grown up, weeds everywhere, and we talking about putting a church here. And the people didn't want us over here in the first place.
Yeah.
It was a situation where we made up our minds that this is where we wanted to be. And this is where we ended up.
And once they raised the salary from about $8 a Sunday to about $12 a Sunday, that really made a difference there, yeah. So.
The second expansion of our church consists of the two wings in the sanctuary, the sound room, the baptistry, and the choir stand. That's the second location that was built in 1983. Once we built that, then we went back into the old sanctuary and cut it up about halfway, and we put sliding doors at the back to make classrooms for Sunday school, for Christian Academy. And then we reworked the bathrooms in the back. That was the second expansion. We had 3 services. We had 8 a.m., 10 a.m., and 12 noon services. Each service was wonderful. The first service would consist of most of the senior members, the ones that wanted to get in, get out as soon as they could. The second service was a mix of the seniors along with mature Christians that wanted to come in at 10 and enjoy a little of the excitement, a little more than the 8 o'clock. It didn't take much for 8, as you could just read the scripture and preach 15 minutes. That was all they was interested in. And they weren't interested in choir. They was not interested in drums, music, or nothing of that nature. They came for pure service, and they was gone. The 12 o'clock service were people that stayed up all night Saturday night and was late and had some other things that kept them up during the night. And they were the ones that showed up at 12 o'clock. That was the 12 o'clock service. More of the younger generation than others, but all 3 services was outstanding, to be exact. We had to do that. We didn't do it just to say we was having 3 services. We did it so that we could accommodate the people. The building whole, with people sitting in the aisle, along with the choir, the chapel, what we call the chapel now, we can seat 1,200 people. And we had to open the sliding doors for that, but we could seat them in, and we needed that because our church grew from 35 members, active members on Tillman Street, up to 8,000 members before we moved out of this building. So we had to have that to accommodate the crowd. We made that decision in 92 that we decided that we was going to build the new facility. And of course, it was very difficult to find funding to do it. We didn't have adequate finances to do it. And then when we brought in an appraisal, they would redline the property so that they bring the value of the property down to keep us from getting funds to build. So we had to reach out to an appraiser out of Los Angeles, California, to come in to do the appraising for us in order for us to do this. Then we went bonds, or we used bond money to get enough funds to build the building. The contractor was introduced to me by another pastor that said he was a reputable contractor and that I could count on him and depend on him. He said he could build a building for $3.6 million. And he said he could do the apartments for $2.5 million. And so since I was going to do both at the same time, I hired him. And of course, by the time we had spent the $3.6 million, we hadn't made it any further than the frame of the building. All we had was a metal frames up in the air. That was it. So we had to acquire more money, which made it that much harder to do. The building sit there for 2 years while we was filing lawsuits against the contractor to try to get it where we needed to have it. And during that process, all kind of rumors spread it, that I had taken the money, that I stole the money, and all the kind of stuff that you normally say when the devil come after you. And finally, I had to put 4 banks together to borrow another $6.7 million in order for us to complete the building. First Tennessee, then I used Union Planners Bank, and then I used a bank, I think it's called the Bank of America, and Tri-State. Those are the 4 banks that let me have enough money to go back and finish the building next door. But we initiated that in 92. It was 95 before we actually started building. There were several of the brothers that was on to sign the contract, didn't want to sign. And when I thought about it, I didn't want to put them in that type of jeopardy, because these are men that had to go home and discuss with their wives and make decisions as a family if they was willing to sign the contract to be guarantors of the loan for the church. So because of that, I would not accept a loan for the church unless I could be the only person signing on the dotted line. I didn't want to put anybody else in jeopardy of that, because they might decide, and they did, to leave and go to some other church. There were 2 deacons that signed earlier when we put the second extension on the church. They came back and wanted their names off of the deed. They wanted it off. They didn't want it on there where we couldn't take it off until the building was paid for. So I didn't want to go through that with the last building, the new building we built. So I made sure that I was the only person that had to sign or could sign. It also meant, though, that if we didn't make it with the church, if we lost the church, if they foreclosed on the church, they was going to foreclose on everything I had. But I was willing to trust the members to be faithful and loyal to help us to get to that point. So that's what we did. I had to guarantee for $6.7 million. That was the second one, but I had to guarantee for the first $3.6 million. 3.6 and 6.7 is what I had to do. My name was the only one signing on both contracts. Yes. Each bill was 6 years. At Tilma, after 6 years, we moved to Parkway. And then, of course, after we moved to Parkway in 78, and then it was 6 years, almost 6, it was 5 years, close to 6, that we did our second edition in 1983. We had the opportunity as well to start purchasing property around the church, and I am so grateful for that. In 1987, the house next door to the church, we call it the Ermentary Building, came available. We purchased that building for $165,000. Then there's a little lot right behind the church. You can't tell it now because it's a parking lot. We purchased that for $6,000 to extend the parking lot. In 1991, the building, the apartments across the street They became abandoned apartments. Memphis Housing Authority moved out and left the apartments there abandoned. It was just shells sitting there in 1981. They put the building up for auction, finally for $202,000. We purchased the apartments for that amount for $202,000. And then we purchased the other side for where our new location is for $375,000. And when we purchased both buildings, we tore the buildings down next door, 44 apartment buildings, and then we built a new structure that's 2237 South Parkway East. And my God, what an outstanding job this New Salem Church has done. The church have always struggled financially, trying to make ends meet, but God has given us always just enough to move from one area to the other. We were able to expand the church with ministries. We went on television in 1978. The third Sunday in August was when we went on radio. And we've been on radio ever since that day up until this day. Then we moved to national television.
I said that one more time. God is good. Said one more time. God is good.
We went on BET. We moved from BET to ESPN. We moved from there to the Word Network, from Word Network to Impact Network. Then we on WLOK radio station on the FM 95.7. I've been a part of our national convention now for 50 years. I became a part of the convention before I started pastoring. And as soon as I started pastoring, I put our church in it to become affiliated with the convention. Each year we would take delegates with our Christian Academy. We did that the whole time that I had been pastor of New Salem, to be a part of the other teaching, the other training of the Baptist movement, the Baptist denomination. And because of that, I have really played a great role in our national convention. I was selected some years ago to serve as the chairman for the late night service. Late night service is the night convention. It's as popular as the whole convention is. My job was to select preacher and pastors and put them on to preach on the national scale so that they could be seen and heard across the nation. Then at the same time, while I was the chairman of the late night service, I served as the lecturer for the layman's department. That's the men ministry of the National Convention. I served there for 5 years. At the same time, I was serving as the late night chair for them. Then I moved from there to being the lecturer for the ministers division. That's the pastors, as 30-some thousand pastors that's involved in that, in the layman's, in the pastors division. I was the lecturer for that for 5 years. And now I serve as the co-director for the pastors division in the National Convention and a board member of the National Convention. So I have been a part of that. And the church, of course, is a part of that ministry of the National Baptist Convention. It was the third Sunday in April 1998 when we moved into this location. Hearts were happy and glad. We recorded the service live on that particular day. The building actually holds 2,500 people. We had a little over 4,000 in the building on that date. We filled the Victory Banquet Hall. We filled the gymnasium. We had chairs down the aisles. Actually had people sitting in the hallway of the church on that particular day. We had special guests to come. Johnny Cochran, the well-known attorney that handled O.J. Simpson's trial, he was in attendance. He had promised me that he would be here on that day, and he did. He came and shared, spent time with us on that particular day, an exciting day that we had been waiting for 3 years to be able to fulfill. It's a day to be remembered, and I'm so grateful for the saints of Salem that went out of their way to make it possible. It was a very great day. What I wanted to do as pastor of the church, I went to the congregation and asked them to allow me to build my vision. We had built, this is our 4th time of building. The other 3 times when we got ready to build what we built, we had committees to vote on it, to make decisions and things of that nature, and to please the congregation the best we could. We did some things because of what certain members wanted and desired. But when it came to this building, I asked them, I said, would you all allow me as pastor to build my vision? Trust me with that. And they did. And what my vision was to put everything under one roof. I've seen many churches with the Christian Life Center attached to it, with the educational building attached to it, with the administrative building attached to it, the Victory Banquet Hall attached to it, and so there are a lot of buildings, and some build a sanctuary first, come back, build a Christian Life Center, then come back and build a banquet facility, and then come back, build an administrative building. That's how most churches do it. But I asked them to allow me to let me lead the church into putting everything under one roof. Now, of course, it was quite expensive to do it, to move from paying $7,000 a month mortgage to $71,000 a month was a Herculean job and an endeavor. But we was able to do it. We moved in this facility with everything ready to roll the first day we moved in. 40 classrooms, Victory Banquet Hall that can hold 500 people, Christian Life Center with exercise facilities, with a walking track on the inside, exercise room, and then, of course, the administrative part of the building with all of the office spaces. We was able to do all of that at one time. So I am grateful for that. I wanted to do something a little different. Many of the churches would, when they built facilities, they would put red carpet down or blue carpet and what have you. I wanted to change it a little bit so that when you walked in New Salem, you would see something that would just kind of jump back at you. So we put a multiplicity of colors in the sanctuary that I liked, and I still like it even today, to bring out the best of the church. We ordered our stained glass window with Jesus inserted on the inside, a picture of a person of color in that picture of Jesus. That many churches use a different persuasion, but because it was an African American church, I wanted us to have African American picture of the Jesus that we worship inserted in there. I also made sure that everywhere you look, you can see a cross. If you're looking from the choir stand, the pulpit area, when you look back, you see the cross inserted there around in the midst of the stained glass. If you're in the sanctuary and you look to the front of the church, you see a cross there. I believe that everything about the church should say something about the cross. The cross is where my sin debt was paid. It is where my eternal check was signed. It's there where I really started living, at the cross. Every church need to remind the saints that it happened at the cross. One of the things that as pastor, I have been very concerned about our deacon ministry, especially the deacon ministry, because I was a deacon. I was crowned as a deacon at the age of 22 years of age, and I served as a deacon for 3 years at my home church. And deacons that are sold out and committed to the Lord need to have something, have an opportunity to express their gifts and their talents and to get involved in ministry. I also believe that men should play a great role in the ministry of the church, because men attract other people. If you get a man that is committed to the cause of Christ, he'll bring his wife. He will bring his children. He'll spend more time in dedication and commitment in the church. Many times it's a deacon ministry that inspire other men to want to play a great role in the church and in the body of Christ. So that's my reason for keeping men, especially deacons, out front. At one while here at Salem, we had 105 deacons. We've got about 55 or 60 now, but we had 105 deacons then, and they attracted other men at New Salem. We got up to almost 2,000 men in our church at one while, because we had men out front playing great role in the ministry. Robert Lee is our chairperson. I've had, as of now, in 49 years, I've had 3 chairmen here at Salem. Eugene Henson was my first chairman that I had. He started preaching. He's pastoring here in our city, even as I speak. Erman Terry was our second chairperson, and he served until he went home to be with the Lord. After Terry passed, I stopped having chairmen for 20, 25 years. And each year I would let a different deacon serve as a president of the ministry. But in the last 3-4 years, I selected Brother Robert Lee to serve as the chairman of the deacon ministry here at Salem. He grew up at this church. He was very faithful, loyal to the church and the kingdom. And so he served as our chairperson as of today. New Salem is a very traditional church. It's a down-home gospel type ministry that love the old hymns, the gospel songs. The people that come, they are attracted to that. New Salem is a church that actually love to have church. Contemporary gospel and ministry has been is not popular with our church at all, to be exact. It's a really traditional type of church and type of ministry here at Salem. And of course, I'm grateful because that's the way I am. I'm very traditional. when it comes to that. I get in trouble many times because I won't move from the traditional style of worship and of church. And I know that to reach our younger group, that I'm going to have to do some leanings, some, to try to attract that age group, because that's where they are. And then when they come to these type of worshipers, then they look like that we're outdated with what we're doing and saying. But that's where our church grew from. That's what we have been about for such a long time.
And I know. I'm Rhonda, Chief of Staff here at New Salem.
And I'm Dante Everhart, y'all. We just had the greatest takeover ever at the Bridge, Memphis, featuring Stellar Award nominated Vincent Bohannon all the way from New York City, y'all.
Look, you gotta join us every second and fourth Monday night at the Bridge.
It's gonna be featuring DJ C Major on the ones and twos, y'all. It's gonna be lit.
No. It's gonna be crunk. You gotta be there.
The Bridge is a ministry that we started to bridge the gap between the generations, the older generation and the younger generation. I've often said that all of us need at least 3 people in our lives. We need a Paul, we need a Barnabas, we need a Timothy. Paul is the person that has been where you're trying to go. Barnabas is the person that will tell you the truth, regardless of wherever you are. And Timothy is the person coming on behind. If we don't have a bridge, per se, then when the older generations die out, then the church will die. So it's important that the older generation embrace the younger generation to help mentor, help mold them, so they can take the leadership role that we have now. We won't be here forever. They need us, but we need them. The older generation now are the ones mostly that people that you can depend on for the financial aspect of the church. But the younger generation, they got the strength, they got the vitality, they got the eagerness, the anxiousness. And shall I say to us that there are a large group of young people that's in love with God. Just because they don't sing the way we sing or act the way we act, it does not mean that they're not in love with God. They love God. They just have different ways of showing it. We don't act like we used to. That things that have changed. You know, when I was young, the 78 record was the thing that's in place. And it moved from the 78 to the 45. And then from the 45 to the 8-track, from the 8-track to the cassette to the CD, and then the DVD, and now they're almost gone. Things change, and we have to be willing to change, and we have to embrace and bring people around us, the younger generation, and listen to them, because they have things that will be vital and effective in the ministry and the body of Christ to get us where we should and ought to be. We should do that.
I became a member of New Salem in 1986, I believe, if not before. My wife now, my girlfriend then, shared with me that I need to hear her pastor. And she kept bugging me about, I need to hear this pastor. So I heard this pastor, and the rest is history. I would say it took approximately 6 months, but I was taken the first time I heard her. We went one Sunday night. That's when we were having night service, and went one Sunday night, and I got real acquainted with the media ministry because I wanted everything he preached. This was in the second church, not the main building now, but actually it's the first church that I was familiar with after they had left Tillman. I joined during the Parkway era, and the first church on Parkway. That's when I became part of New Salem. When I joined, I was already a preacher. I served at my grandfather's church out in Douglas, James Ola, El Betha. And I left El Betha and I joined Salem. So I was already a preacher when I joined in 1986. After joining, I guess about 3 or 4 years, pastor gave me the position of new membership leader. And so I was over the new membership for a good tenure, and then from new membership, I was called to walk alongside of him to be his assistant. 12 years I served with Dr. Ray at Salem, 12 wonderful years. Serving with him, I learned so much. It really prepared me so much in ways that I wasn't aware of, that is helping me so much in my current position now as senior pastor at New Hope. He had prepared me in so many ways that I just wasn't aware of. Just the conversations we have, the trips we would have, things that he would share with me about pastoring people, preaching, studying. One of the things that he impressed upon me was to be very studious. He would tell us, if you have a choice over getting a suit or a shirt versus a book, get the book, because the book is going to make way for the shirt and suit. And so he programmed in us to be very studious, and in me, he invested a lot of time in me to be very studious, and always recommending books, always sharing ways to get better. And if I could say a little bit more on that, I am really impressed even today that he's still going and so much ahead of his craft, cutting edge in the sense that he was the first one to introduce Logos and Abronics and all of these softwares that would teach you Greek and Hebrews. And so it's just amazing how even now we look to him, and we are amazed that he was cutting edge back then, and he still is cutting edge, and we're still learning from him even now. So he hadn't slowed down yet, so I'm still trying to catch up. I experienced phenomenal growth at New Salem. It was nothing to receive 20, 30, 40 people a Sunday. Through preaching, he did it the old-fashioned way, just stump down preaching every Sunday. And we experienced phenomenal growth. The new membership staff, we had to work overtime to make sure things were in place, because people were coming so quick and so fast. And as leader of new membership classes, I had to make sure each and every Tuesday night people were in place, each and every Sunday people were in place, because we had to indoctrinate or get these people into the new Salem church family. So we had to work overtime. And so we experienced phenomenal growth during that time. And the new membership ministry was a major part in that growth. Oh my, in our heyday, we were doing 3 morning service and a night service. So that was 4 services a Sunday. And we were running out of one service into another. And it was amazing to see. Well, with any church, you're gonna have some pushback, because most people traditionally, we don't like change, and we like things to stay the way they are. However, Dr. Ray was able to transition well, and transition in a way where he built this mega church on the road for the most part, And that is something that is should be commended nowadays to because it's unheard of for a pastor to be on the road and to build a church of that magnitude. And so we as preachers and pastors, we salute him for that. But members had, some members had issues with it, but for the most part, everybody was excited. Everybody was thankful to God, thankful to the leadership of our pastor and the church family to move us to a place where we had more space. And because we were sitting on top of each other for a long time, and just to have space was something that we embraced.
I would say we live in a time of sensationalism. The more fecal matter you can stir, the more it smells. And the more people are going to gravitate to it. But I think once that smell goes down, the interest in what is going on goes down. You also have people who are looking to stir up trouble. And there are certain people on radio to this day, that on TV, that major in stirring up mess. And I think that if you don't tie into that mindset, it goes away. But if you tie into that mindset, the more you stir fecal matter, the more it's going to smell.
Well, I think, there was a lot of discussion, and we all, would hear various things. We'd run into people, oh, you remember New Salem? Oh, that's where that so-and-so took place over there, And I would say, yeah, I'm a member of New Salem, and I'll be at New Salem for the rest of my life. I've always been a member. And you're going to have a few problems here and there. And if you want to believe, you can believe whatever you want. I have full faith in our pastor. I have full faith in our membership. And, and I'm still here. We've got a number of our members who are still here. And, whatever you want to think, that's your prerogative. But I think basically most of the ones who've been here, who've grown up with Reverend Ray, we know where Reverend Ray has brought us from. From 50 members up to 5,000 or 6,000 members. I know what we've gone through. You all can say whatever you want. That's left up to you. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm here to stay, and and I have a deep respect for our pastor. So basically, that's all you can do is just, give your point of view, and as long as you stick and stay, because Reverend Ray, we've stuck by him, no matter from whatever discussions that might have come up in the neighborhood, in the communities or whatever. There have been a core members, I guess, who have stuck by him, and I think people see that, and they see, oh, you still at New Salem? Yeah, I'm still at New Salem, and I'll be at New Salem. So, and so, oh, okay, all right, well, and they just let it be that. So,
I think another thing too, a lot of times there's a degree of jealousy that you have, especially among the clergy. One in particular situation I remember, he said, "What is it true that Frank Ray is at Memphis Theological Seminary?" Yes, he is. What is he doing there? Because many of the people there get doctorate degrees and whatever. And so I told him, I said, look here, I look at how your church is growing. and how New Salem is growing. To me, there's no comparison. How can you belittle him and his church is exploding and yours is stagnant? And that's when I made the comment. I said, don't ever try it on me again. And this is a very good friend of mine. And the day he died, he never said anything against Frank Ray again.
Yeah, I think any negative actions or anything that creates a scar to the church, it's going to have an impact. But just as you've said, those who are grounded and committed to it understand that all have sinned and come short of glory of God, and we are broken vessels. And there are going to be some brokenness in our churches. There are going to be some issues that come up that are not inducive to what we may assume to be spirituality at its highest. But even in that, those who are grounded in the Word, those that have relationship with God, we continue and we go on. You'll have a flux that may leave, but then you have a flux that will come in. So God will take care of his church. He said, upon this rock I build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. And so God's church is going to stand regardless of what we even do sometimes. And so we're confident that this is God's house, and God is going to take care of his preacher and his people.
There's a constant saying, you leave with the person that you came to the dance with. All right. Now, you came to the dance with Frank Ray. You ought to leave there with him, unless there's a reason. Now, I think that a lot of the things that's going on now about the sexual harassment and all this kind of stuff, you're hearing a lot about this. But a lot of it is nothing but hoopla, and it's just a thing where people are, it's their moment in the sunlight, and they're taking advantage of that.
But the scriptures say you pray for your enemies.
Yeah.
And so that's what I do. I pray for those who despitefully use you.
That's right.
And prayer works.
It does.
Because of the Sunday incident, I was taken away and had to go to we went to a funeral of one of our member's sister that same day before the incident happened. And so that's why I know how the Lord will shield you and protect you from seen and unseen danger.
Yeah. So,
and all the press that came from it, that's what the news is all about. It's all about finding something. Even when the man was marching across the sidewalk with the sign, that was news. And that, so we've been given good press and we've been given negative
bad press. Yeah.
But I just prefer to look at the positive rather than the negative.
But I'll tell you another thing too. Scriptures always said, you separate, you don't separate the wheat from the tares. Let them grow up. In the right time, you separate them. But now if you separate them in the beginning, there's a chance you can pull the wheat up with the tares. You don't do that. And another thing, like I said, you ask yourself, what is the motivation behind a lot of the things? Now, this thing with Cuomo in New York, it said that he made the comment to lady that he was tired of eating by himself. She considered that harassment. I'm saying there was not more involved in just that, but I'm tired of eating by myself. Would you like to have dinner with me? Is that sexual harassment? The answer is no. If I don't want to eat with you, I don't eat with you. But I think that people have their moment in the limelight, and they take advantage of that. And I think this is what is going on, say, in that situation, and what is going on really here. Even to the point where I think somebody took pictures of Reverend Ray's house out there, you know. He asked them to pay one note on the house. If I can afford $1 million home, that's my business. It ain't yours. And why is it that you're concerned? Is it because you feel that you can't afford one like it? You know, no, not being on the soapbox.
A lot of our members, they love the fellowship that we have among each other. Even though Reverend Ray is our pastor, but they look at the way we all seem to work together and love each other and gel together. And I've had people say, you know, Brother Taylor, I look at the way you live, you know, the light that you shine, and it really helps strengthen me, you know, and because of that, you know, I'm here in New Salem, you know, I don't care what you say, what nobody say, you know, and a lot of people just feel that, you know, that this church is a church where the spirit truly meets the soul, and Reverend Ray has ingrained that in us over the years, and even though if he ever left here, I think people would still feel that same way, and that love and that good fellowship, genuine fellowship. You know, you can go in some churches and you just may not really feel at home, but here, I think if you stay here long enough, you know, it'll just become a part of you. And so no matter what else goes on, you know, the love that you show, the light that you shine will affect others.
You will always have people trying to divide and conquer. You don't let that occur. And I would say, even if you might have some doubts in your mind, don't let it be shown until you know what the situation really is.
Well, I would think that the fact that we are a church that is welcoming everyone, we want to do all we can to try to help the community. We try to do that by the food distributions. We do it by just opening up our facility to those in the community who needs it. We try to get involved in the political life of our city by trying to influence the good things that we need in our city of Memphis. Our pastor is one who believes in spreading the word, believes that we should be we go downtown, we had I think they call it Open Doors Church, where we met with the people, the homeless down on Beale Street and other areas, trying to help them. And so being a church that is open to everyone and willing to try to help our fellow man. And I think that's basically what we want to be remembered by, basically, is one who loves our fellow man, and we want to do all we can to try to help our fellow man.
My prayer is each night that our church would be that beacon that sits on a hill, that let our light so shine that men may see our good works and glorify the Father which is in heaven. I thank God for us, as both Gotti and Winella mentioned, that we still do our mission work. Reverend mentioned that if we are Missionary Baptist Church,
You should do mission work.
we should be doing mission work. And our mission, even though we've been closed, not fully open for a year, the work has still gone on. We've still gone down to Union Mission. We still continue to feed and clothe, have the clothing giveaway. So those things that we've done to show that our community, our nation, our world, we're still doing it, but there's still more that we can do. I still think we can do more.
Yeah.
And one of my mores is the Terry building be renovated. That's not one of my mores. The other more is that our steeple be returned to the church. Even more. And we've been over here too long without an electric sign. That's my third more. Even more that we can do.
And we can do more to get more young people involved
And more.
Yeah.
in our church and its activities. That's one of the main things
Right.
I think we
And I would say too, this whole, all that we do today, with the number of people that we have today, we're standing on the shoulders of the Will Wardells, and Sylvester Wardell, and Sadie Burks, and the Hubbards, and the Taylors, and the Cowards, all these folk. We're standing on their shoulders. And we are a reflection of what they instilled in us. We are, the church is a great church because of the people that have gone before us.
Yeah.
And we've been blessed with good leadership. I say that that is our forte. That is our main thing. Leadership and people willing to follow that leadership. And not willing to just run off with every little thing that you hear. Everything negative that you hear, run with it. This is not really what New Salem has been about, and I say this has been one of the strengths of this church.
Yeah.
I think New Salem has, it's not the only church that have had some problems, encountered situations, but I think we've gone past the foolishness and the stupidity of the people that created havoc around our church with animosity and trying to belittle us and the ministry and the people that listen to foolishness. I think that's well behind now. The church I think, is doing wonderful, fantastic. People are coming back to Salem. They're still talking about it. They're being blessed through the ministry. And I am so grateful for that. It does not yet appear what God will do through the ministry here at New Salem, whether it be with me or without me. It's a great church. It has a great base, have studious members, wonderful teachers in the ministry, outstanding gift, talented musicians here at our church, a wonderful administrative staff. So we have everything in place for New Salem to excel to higher heights. Whenever a preacher, a pastor, open the door of the church, two things happen. Number one, the one want to come in, come in. But the ones that want to go out, leave. And God put people in your life in three different ways. He put some people in your life for an event, and they will be there until the event is gone. Many times that's short. Sometimes he will put people in your life for an era. That means you'll be there for a while, 5 years, 10 years, but then you go. And then every now and then he puts somebody in there for an eternity. That means they'll be there for the long haul. By having as many members of Salem that we've had here in Salem, we got up to a little over 8,000 at one while here in Salem. I licensed and ordained a little over 100 preachers to preach the gospel. 80 of them are pastoring other churches. Now, out of the 80, most of them took somebody when they left, if it was nothing but just their wives and children. So you think in terms of the 80 preachers, or the 100 that left, or 80 that left, then you consider that there are people working on jobs transfer to other areas. I travel somewhere every week. It's rare that I go to any city that I don't run into some of the former members of New Salem. They are all over the world. That's why James 1:1, it said, James, a servant of God, it says, and of the Lord Jesus Christ, to the 12 tribes which are scattered. The Greek word for scattered is diaspora. Dios means through, spora means to sow. That whenever you share the gospel and a person is deposited in the word of God, he shares the gospel everywhere he goes, across the nation. So even though there are some that's not here, they're still doing the work in other areas across the country. Some leave, but God turn around and send some more back. I believe to my heart that the church belongs to the Lord. Upon this rock, I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. Meaning this, that God send to the church whom he want to be at the church at the time. And then God turn around and dismiss those that he don't want to be there. And I believe that every person that left, every person that came, they're here for a reason. God brought them to do ministry. And I must remind myself over and over and over again that New Salem is not mine. It's mine only through stewardship. Is crisis through ownership. Upon this rock I'll build my church, and the gates of hell shall not prevail against it. New Salem belongs to God, not to me. I must render as an obedient steward to do what God has called me to do and to be. And it has been a wonderful journey for me. My God, 49 years have passed so fast, it looked like it was just yesterday that I mounted the pulpit and preached that sermon, I must be about my Father's business, 49 years ago, and I'm still doing it.
Ray. I fell in love with Dr. Ray, so much so until I just showed up at his house. And at that time, I think I was about 20 years old. And his wife answered the door, and I asked, "Is Pastor here?" Unannounced or anything. Pastor came to the door. I was speechless. I had nothing to say. He was like, "Okay." And then he just finally said, "Jose, come on in." And we have been partners ever since. He couldn't get rid of me. I was always on his trail. I literally stalked him up until that day. And then he just invited me in, and we have been father-son ever since. He claimed me as his son, and it's just not something that he says, but he really treats me like his son, and I really appreciate that. To be in his position, he could have discarded me, but he embraced me, and I shall never, ever forget him for that. And I remember a time I was helping him in his backyard, and he asked me to hold, we was fixing our outer house, and he asked me to hold the door. And I was holding the door, and he asked for a hammer, give me the hammer. So I let the door go, and the door slammed on his head. And I was so hurt and embarrassed. I lifted up, and he just looked at me and had that grin and smiled, and he's been that way ever since. And I want to tell you, Pastor, I'm sorry about that door hitting you on your head. I think about that all the time. But I love you much. Love New Salem. Miss y'all a whole lot. Thank you so much for allowing me to share this interview.
In October 2016, we was able to reach a plateau, accomplish a goal that I am still baffled over now. We was able to pay off $11 million mortgage of the church, making the church clear of all debts. Everything has been paid for and in full. I owe gratitude to Dr. Rhonda Hooks that led us in that endeavor. I'm grateful to all of the saints of Salem that worked untiringly to make it happen, to make it possible. We are so grateful that we was able to reach that goal. I'm sure there are, but I don't know many churches that were in Memphis that was able to pay off $11 million debt and get it behind you. And so you could go on with greater ministry. And that's what happened to us here at Salem. And I hope and pray that our children, our children's children, and children's children's children will be able to look at what New Salem has done and what we are doing, and that they will do greater things in years and days to come. I shall ever be forever grateful to the pioneers that went before us, the ones that worked with us, and the ones coming on behind us to stand on our shoulders to do greater ministry than what has already been done.
Those who were truly committed and dedicated, they'll be back.
That's right.
I meet with my Sunday school class every Saturday morning through a conference call at 8 o'clock. And they are waiting. I mean, all of them are waiting to come back. They're just waiting on us to say, when are we going back to church? And so I feel like that these people are very dedicated, but we have stayed connected ever since, last April. I mean, and this is why our pastor had us to call at least 10 members, to try to connect and reconnect, because that's very important. But there are going to be a few that's going to drift away. But I think as a whole, I would think at least 75-80% of the true members will be back, and I'm looking forward to it in April. So these are committed members.
I agree. I would say this, that you said 75-80%. I think that a sizable amount in that 15 to 20% will come back too.
Yeah.
As time goes on, there's always a bit of skepticism when you jump into something that you're not accustomed to. And I've always maintained this, that you can have a PhD in swimming, but you will never swim until you get in the water. So, you know, I don't care how you know about swimming, you will learn how to swim in the water.
New Salem is a church that started out with nobody knowing New Salem. People would get confused when you said New Salem, for there are about 5 New Salems in Memphis. The one Hawkins, New Salem, Hawkins Mill, New Salem on 4th Street, this New Salem, and you got another Salem, and you got a couple Salem, other Salems here. New Salem was a church that was unknown, and even during the apex of New Salem, when it was at its strongest, was just getting ready to spread abroad. New Salem is one of those churches now that's known all over the world, that any city you go in, anywhere you go, if you mention Memphis, anybody in the Christian family have heard of New Salem and Pastor Ray. And so even though we may not have as many members today as we had 10 years ago, we still have a large group of people. It's still one of the largest churches membership-wise in the city of Memphis, but it is known abroad, across the nation. We still have 15, 20,000 followers that follow us across the country weekly, that watch YouTube, Facebook, and everything else. So I am well pleased with the strength of New Salem. It's still in the number, even now. And I'm so grateful for that.
What's your plan? Everybody else wants to know since I'm asking this question.
When the Lord called me to preach, I didn't want to do it. I went 5 years after I knew the Lord had called me to preach, before I actually accepted the call into the ministry. I was 20 when he called me, when I discovered he had called me. But because of my knowledge and my lack of wisdom and understanding of being a pastor and a preacher, I was fearful of that position, and God had to arrest me to get me to surrender to the call of ministry. Strangest thing happened though, that messed the whole thing up, that just kind of blew my mind, was that it was the second Sunday in September, 1971, at 11 a.m. at Hammond Grove Baptist Church in Arlington, Tennessee. At the same time, second Sunday in September 1971, the deacon minister of New Salem stood and announced that they were retiring the pastor of this church. The same day, same hour, same time, as God called me and I accepted the call, it's the same time, same day, he opened a door for me to walk in. I was told that I wouldn't make it 6 months. The person that was near and dear to me, when the church called me, I called him and said, New Salem has called me to be their pastor. And he said to me, if I was you, I wouldn't take it. And I said, why? He said, well, number one, nobody's there. He said, secondly, they ain't gonna do nothing but hurt you. Both things happen. Well, nobody here, and I have been hurt. But in spite of that, God was with me. Now, I said that to say this, that I have enough sense to know that I cannot stay here forever. And I want New Salem, above all, to prosper and to be the kind of church that God would have New Salem to be. I'm listening to the voice of God for Him to tell me when is the most best and productive time for me to move over and someone else move in and take the ministry. I've taught other pastors and preachers, be careful how you give back to God what He has given you. That's a such thing as you making the move and not God. God is smart enough to let any person know that when it's your time to move on and let somebody else take over. That's what I'm listening to, the voice of God. He's keeping me in health and in strength. Everything is wonderful as of today. It could change tomorrow. My health is in impeccable shape, and I'm so grateful to God for that. I would never want to be any preacher or pastor who sit around and let the church die before I move on. That's my answer to that. I want to appreciatively applaud Salem Wiley, Pastor Wendell Coward, Brother Gotti Taylor, and all of the group that came along during that time and that kept New Salem going long before I got here. I applaud their parents. Wendell's mother was a secretary of this church. Gotti's mother was involved in this church. Sadie's family was part of the cornerstone of the New Salem church family, and others. They encouraged me. They have motivated me. They did so many outstanding things, and the joy, they're still here. Sadie, 80 years of age, still here, active and involved. Gotti, 77, 78, still here. Brother Pastor Coward, 80, still here. I thank God. I salute these people and others for what they've done to make New Salem what it is now. God bless you all.